Did you know that God has a calendar? That our Father in heaven actually has an annual calendar with set times that we call appointments. In fact, the scriptures refer to these times that He has set aside for us to meet with us as divine appointments. These are His appointed times, times that He carved out to spend with us. And even more importantly, this calendar that God has given to us, it actually is a cycle of redemption. It teaches us about the great plan of salvation. It marks it out, and we get to see how it unfolds throughout the year, the whole meaning and purpose of redemption within a calendar that reveals who the Messiah is, what He would accomplish in his coming to the earth, and what He's going to accomplish when He comes again. All of this revealed in our Father's calendar, a calendar that He intended for us, those whom He has redeemed. It was intended to order our lives. You know, every year I get out a calendar and we look at all the dates on the calendar and we move around the things that are important in relationship to what's on the calendar. I mean, everyone can relate to national holidays, of course, and how we kind of like move things around those times in which we normally spend with our family. Well, God has set times. And every year I get out my calendar and I look at God's appointed times and I move everything around those times. I make those times the priority. Why? They're His appointments to meet with us in a significant way, to give us context for how we live our lives as His people, to give us, of course, a perspective of who He is and what He's doing in the world in which we live in. This is so important for us. Now, the sad thing is what I call the Great Divide. It's when the early church, the post-apostolic church, decided to separate itself from the Jewish people, to, in a sense, reject the Torah of Moses as a way of life. And in doing so, they created a vacuum. All of a sudden, the holy days were gone. And so what would the church do? Well, it recreated a calendar for themselves that was actually disconnected from Israel and the Jewish people. In fact, the identification of Israel and the Jewish people was the very thing that in part motivated the church to recreate a calendar. The great Roman Empire at that time was persecuting the people of God, intensely persecuting the Jewish people in Israel. And so the early church, in part of their motivation was saying, we don't want to experience that. That's pretty intense. And so that was one of the reasons they moved away from the calendar. Now, in recreating the calendar, of course, they were trying to buddy up with Rome. They wanted to show Rome that they were good Roman Christians that supported Rome, and in doing so, hopefully would escape this persecution that was coming close to them in many different ways. So what did they do? In recreating the calendar, they brought a mixture of Roman pagan traditions related to how we would now worship God. Not only to how we would worship Him, but even more importantly, when we would worship Him. And this is where the church, in my estimation, got off the track of sanctification. Again, trying to escape the persecution in part, but it led them to a place in which they created a calendar that would really create new problems in ways that were much greater than what they ever imagined. The tragic result of this, of course, is that Jesus would be stripped of His Jewishness. His words would be stripped of their meaning, ripped out of their original historical, theological, and cultural context. And as a result, the church then would be in some ways at a loss in terms of their understanding of Jesus. So the church recreated Jesus, so to speak. And in my estimation, they brought so many changes and so many new things to Jesus and who He was and what His words were that, in effect, they created a Jesus in their own image, a Jesus that most Jewish people would never recognize, a Jesus that in many ways is foreign to the Jesus that we see in the sacred text. This is a monstrous disgrace and assault on the truth. The big question is this: can we find the real Jesus? Is it possible to rediscover who Jesus really is? I would say yes, only if we're willing to pursue and even chase the truth. So in our next show, we're going to discuss the answer to the problem of finding the real Jesus. And I assure you that he can be found if one is willing to reframe him in his original historical and theological and cultural setting. If we're willing to reframe him in those settings, we'll discover the real Jesus. And that, my friends, is worth all the work. So thanks for joining me today. And I encourage you to please subscribe to this channel, comment below, and check out our website, graftedin.com.